We're going to continue on. We've got 3 weeks to cover 4 chapters. 2 of these chapters are rather lengthy. These first 2 chapters we're going to cover tonight. They're the 2 shortest of the 4. And we're going to see King David at his very best. And I want you to remember that, because next Sunday night we're going to see him at his worst. And that things aren't going to go as well from then on. But we'll see David at his best here. Now, we've got 2 Samuel chapter 9, David's kindness to Mephibosheth. That's the name you need to remember, Mephibosheth. And then we're going to read about Joab's victory over Ammon and Syria, and he has to fight them together. And it's really an exciting chapter, and there's several things that lead up to that battle that make all of this really, really interesting here. So let's look at David's kindness to Mephibosheth. 2 memory verses, and both of them talk of David's kindness. Kindness is a theme here in these 2 chapters. David said, "Is there yet any that is left of the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Okay? The next one, 2 Samuel 10 in verse 2. "Then said David, I will show kindness under Hanun, the son of Nahash, as his father showed kindness unto me. And David sent to comfort him by the hand of his servants for his father. And David's servants came into the land of the children of Ammon." Kindness. 3 times in these 2 memory verses. And we're going to talk this first chapter. It's this has to be David at his best in 2 Samuel chapter 9. And we're going to see in this chapter the virtues of friendship and of kindness and of promise keeping. I want you to remember 1 and 2 Samuel is really just the book of Samuel. It wasn't divided into 2 until it was translated in the Greek. In the Hebrew, it's 1 book. And so when you're reading 2 Samuel, the story begins in 1 Samuel. And in 1 Samuel chapter 20, 14 through 17, this is one of the last meetings that David has with Jonathan. They meet once again for a brief time, and they weep over their departing. But do you remember how David and Jonathan loved one another? Jonathan, David, Saul's son, and David. Jonathan would have been king, but for David, and yet Jonathan loved David. And that friendship. And in one of their last meetings, Jonathan knew David would be king someday. And he got a promise from David. Someday you'll be king. And David, when you're king, and I'm gone, look after my family for me. Well, in verse 14, "And thou shalt not only while yet I live show me the kindness of the Lord, that I die not, but also thou shalt not cut off thy kindness from my house forever. No, not when the Lord hath cut off the enemies of David, every one from the face of the earth." So Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, "Let the Lord even require it at the hand of David's enemies." And Jonathan caused David to swear again, because he loved him, for he loved him as he loved his own soul. Now David is king, and he's got rest from his enemies. And so 2 Samuel chapter 9, David said, "Is there yet any that is left of the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Isn't that just a beautiful verse? And I want you to remember now, what's the custom? When the new king comes into power, what does he do? He kills everyone that could be his rival. That's what the normal thing to do was. Kill everyone that might be a rival to me in my kingdom. But David didn't do that. And I would imagine that if you had been a descendant of Saul and David becomes king, you're laying low and hiding out. So here's what happens. David asked, and there was of the house of Saul a servant. Now this is one of Saul's old servants, whose name was Ziba. Now we're going to have to remember him. Mephibosheth and Ziba are going to show up later in the story about David. So let's remember these names. And when they had called him unto David, the king said unto him, Art thou Ziba? He said, Thy servant is he. And the king said, Is there not yet any of the house of Saul, that I may show the kindness of God unto him? And Ziba said to the king, Jonathan hath yet a son, which is lame in his feet. Mephibosheth is lame in both feet, so he can't walk. So he's crippled. He's handicapped there. And someone's been having to look after him, and Ziba knows about this. But I want you to notice what David says here. Notice this language. Is there not yet any of the house of Saul, that I may show the kindness of God unto him? We need to think about showing the kindness of God. When we're showing kindness to someone, let's not just say, well, I want them to think I'm kind. No, let God use us to show His kindness unto others. Just think about we can show the kindness of God. And if we'll put ourselves in God's hand, we can become tools and instruments in His hand through which God can show His kindness to others. That's one of the things you get from this beautiful chapter. Well, the king said unto him, Where is he? Ziba said to the king, Behold, he's in the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, in Lodabar. Well, we're not sure where Lodabar was. It's sort of like a little town like Nazareth. It's a place you could hide out. Nobody knows really where Lodabar is, see? And so Mephibosheth sounds like he's kind of hiding out here in some little unknown village. You might find Lodabar on a map, but I doubt it. And if it's there, whoever put it there is guessing that it's there. Because it's one of those little villages that we're not sure where it is. Well, King David sent and fetched him out of the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, from Lodabar. Now, what if you were Mephibosheth, and now the king's come for you? Think about that. Well, now when Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, was coming to David, he fell on his face and did reverence. And David said, Mephibosheth. And he answered, Behold thy servant. Now Mephibosheth is really showing his humility here. He knows this could be it for me. And David said to him, Fear not. He must have been afraid. David relieves that fear. Fear not, for I will surely show thee kindness for Jonathan thy father's sake. And I'll restore thee all the land of Saul thy father. And thou shalt eat bread at my table continually. You see, the land was portioned out to the families, and it was the inheritance of that family, and God had determined that inheritance would stay with that family. Now, after Saul's dead and his sons are dead, that land's in the hands of someone else. David says, Mephibosheth, that's your land. You're going to get that inheritance that's intended for you. Now, Mephibosheth, he's lame in his feet. What's he going to do? He can't be a farmer. Well, it says he bowed himself and said, What is thy servant that thou shouldst look upon such a dead dog as I am? Mephibosheth, with his lame feet and his inability to do work, he felt as useless as a dead dog. Now, that's pretty useless, isn't it? And so he's just showing his humility. And you got to remember now that dogs, those were low-down creatures. I mean, if you want to talk about a low-down creature, we sometimes talk about skunks the way they talk about dogs. And so for him to say, I'm like a dead dog to you, it's almost like somebody saying, I'm no better than a dead cat or a dead skunk, thinking how useless he is. But then King called Ziba. Okay, Ziba. Now, Ziba's going to show up in a few more chapters, and it's not good. But right now, he called Saul's old servant, Ziba, Saul's servant, said to him, I've given to thy master's son all that pertained to Saul and all his house. Thou therefore and thy sons and thy servants shall till the land for him. And thou shalt bring in the fruits, that thy master's son may have food to eat. But Mephibosheth, thy master's son, shall eat bread always at my table. Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Well, that's 35 men to go out there and work that land. And so Mephibosheth is set up, isn't he? And he gets to eat at the king's table. I mean, the king would have the best, wouldn't he? And so Mephibosheth is right there. Then said Ziba to the king, verse 11, according to all that my lord the king hath commanded his servant, so shall thy servant do. As for Mephibosheth, said the king, he shall eat at my table as one of the king's sons. And Mephibosheth had a young son whose name was Micah. Now, if my memory serves me right, we're going to read something else about him as well. But it'll come later. And all that dwell in the house of Ziba were servants unto Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth dwelt in Jerusalem, for he did eat continually at the king's table and was lame in both his feet. Beautiful story, isn't it? About how David took care of this helpless Mephibosheth. He's showing his love for Jonathan in doing this. And he's showing the kindness of God through him. And so the love of friendship and kindness and promise-keeping are all part of the story of David in 2 Samuel 9. Now let's go, well here, the three names to remember because they come up later. Mephibosheth, Micah, and Ziba. It's going to be interesting how these names come up later. Now, 2 Samuel chapter 10. It came to pass after this that the king of the children of Ammon died. Now that's Nahash. You might remember Nahash. Nahash was the king of Ammon when the Ammonites surrounded Jabesh Gilead and said, we're going to destroy your town. And the men of Jabesh Gilead didn't want it destroyed. And he said, all right, have all the men poke their eye out, and I won't destroy it, and you be my servants. They said, well, give us a few days. And that's when Saul came to their rescue. Remember that story about King Saul? All right, and David had told the men of Jabesh Gilead, says, you know, I'm going to show kindness to you like Saul did. This is that king, but then this is going to refer to something that we don't have a record of. This king dies, and Hanun, his son, reigned in his stead. Now you got to watch these new young kings. Sometimes they get to thinking too much of themselves, and Hanun is going to do just that. Now, then David said, I will show kindness unto Hanun, the son of Nahash, as his father showed kindness unto me. I went back to 1 Samuel and I couldn't find it. At some point, though, Nahash had shown kindness unto David. Maybe while David was a fugitive. Maybe because Nahash and Saul didn't get along, and he's, okay, here's David. I helped David. He's against Saul. We got a common enemy. We don't really know the story there. But somewhere along the way, this king was going to poke the eyes out, have the men of Jabesh Gilead put their eyes out, but yet sometime along the way, he showed kindness to David. And now when he dies, and his son is king, David is going to show kindness to his son. You know, that happens, doesn't it? You show kindness, you know it comes back. It's kind of like boomerang. You show kindness, it comes back. If it doesn't come back to you, it's going to come back to your children, maybe your grandchildren. Kindness has a way of making its way back home. Well, David's going to show kindness, so David sent to comfort him by the hands of his servant for his father. And David's servants came into the land of the children of Ammon. Now the problem here is Hanun. He doesn't know how to receive kindness. And I guess I guess he was feeling pretty smart. Here, I'm the king now. I'll do better than my father did. And it's easy for someone to get in a new spot like that and have authority and really mess up right off the bat. And that's what Hanan's going to do. The men from David show up. And the princes of the children of Ammon said unto Hanan their lord, thinkest thou that David doth honor thy father, that he sent comforters unto thee? Hath not David rather sent his servants to thee to search the city and to spy it out and overthrow it? See, these counselors Hanan had, they didn't trust David, and so they're not coming to comfort thee. They're spying. They're checking things out. You better watch that. And Hanan, look what he does. Wherefore Hanan took David's servants and shaved off one half of their beards. Oh, what a sight that would be. I've seen people shave half their head off, and I thought, wow, that's kind of strange looking. But I've never seen someone with just half a beard. Now, don't let that word get out. Somebody will try it in this crazy day. But they shaved off half their beard, and then they did this. They cut up their garments in the middle, even to their buttocks, and sent them away. They humiliated those men. Can you imagine that? I mean, you don't have anything to cover yourself up with, and half your beard shaved off. He's showing contempt for David and humiliated those men. Now we're going to read about Jericho here. I want to remember Jericho, the city of palm trees. I mean, going to Jericho, that's kind of like a trip to Florida. I mean, good fruits, good water, palm trees. And here's what David says to those men. He said, look, when it was told David, he sent to meet them because the men were greatly ashamed. The king said, tarry at Jericho till your beards be grown and then return. I mean, that's a nice place to stay for a while your beard grow back. You get some good clothes, and man, I tell you, you're putting up good. If I was one of those men, I'd probably just shave the other half of my beard off, and let it all grow back together. I don't know how they did that. But in those days, your beard was the sign of your manhood. You shave, they look at us, they think we were a bunch of wimpy men. We don't have beards, I'll tell you where this comes from. See, men, they're supposed to have beards. And it was kind of, I guess, an ego thing to make sure you have a beard. And then came Alexander the Great. He was a fighter. And he watched these men fight growing up. And what they do, they grab each other's beards. And I'm going to grab my beard. He shaved. Alexander the Great shaved his beard. And so they didn't have anything to grab when they was fighting him. He had the advantage on them. And from then on, men have been shaving their beards. I mean, if Alexander the Great can do it, I can be a man and shave my beard. So I guess that was the way that we foolish men think, But from then on, men have been able to shave their beards and get by with it. But before Alexander the Great, if you didn't have a beard, you weren't much a man, see? So, stay at Jericho till your beard be grown and return. And when the children of Ammon saw that they stank before David, well, they did it because of contempt for him. Now David doesn't like them. They stank before David. The children of Ammon sent and hired the Syrians of Beth-rehob and the Syrians of Zobah, 20,000 footmen, and of the king of Makkah, 1,000 men, and of Ishtob, 12,000 men. I tell you, this king of Ammon, I'm going to hire the Syrians and get them on my side. And so, the rest of the people he delivered to the... Whoops, did I skip some? Okay, I got to read it. 2 Samuel 10. I must have missed this. I'll just have to read it to you because I don't think it's up on the chart there. 2 Samuel 10. We'll begin in verse 7. And it says this. And when David heard of it, he sent Joab. You remember Joab? he sent Joab and all the host of the mighty men. And the children of Ammon came out and put the battle in array at the entering of the gate. And the Syrians of Zobah and of Rehob and of Ishtob and of Maacah were by themselves in the field. And when Joab saw the front of the battle was against him before and behind, he chose all of the choice men of Israel and put them array against the Assyrians. Now verse 10. And the rest of the people he delivered into the hand of Abishai his brother, that he might put them in array against the children of Ammon. And he said, if the Syrians be too strong for me, then thou shalt help me. But if the children of Ammon be too strong for thee, then I'll come help thee. Be of good courage. Let us play the men for our people in the cities of our God, and the Lord do that which seemeth good. It's time for us to show ourselves men. Let's be of good courage. Quit ye like men, Paul would say. Let's just see what God will do. He'll know what to do. What they did was this. Joab comes up to the children of Ammon and then looks up, and all these Syrians come up behind him. They got Joab in a trap with the Ammonites in front and the Syrians behind. What are you going to do, Joab? If you ever go to West Tennessee on your way to Jackson, you're going to pass an exit. Before you get to Jackson, if you look on both sides, there's cannons aimed at the interstate. Now, these are Civil War cannons. And on either side, they're aimed at the interstate. And you go on up, and it's called Parker's Crossroads. If you got a chance, stop and read the signs and tour the little battlefield. The interstate runs right down the middle of where the battle lines were. Here's what happened. Nathan Bedford Forrest was on one of his raids through West Tennessee. He'd caught a bunch of prisoners. He's coming down from the north, down through McKenzie, and came down there. And now the Yankees, they went out to meet him. And so they meet him at Parker's Crossroads. Nathan Bedford Forrest coming down, and the Yankees, Bedford was coming from the north. He was a Southerner, but he's coming from the north, and the Yankees from the north are coming up from the south. And they meet at Parker's Crossroads. And Nathan Bedford Forrest is ready to take them on. And just before he enters into the battle, someone rides up to the general and says, "General, there's an army behind us." What Forrest did not know was that the Yankees had been chasing him. And the Yankee generals knew it. They got Forrest in a trap. Now they've got an army in front of him and an army behind him. What do you do? Well, Forrest reared up in his saddle and looked around and gave one of his famous orders. Charge both ways. That's what he did. He split his army down the middle, and they charged. They didn't wait to be attacked. They charged, and they charged both ways. Now, here's the plan. See, if he charges us, you come up, but we'll fall back, and you come behind him. And if he charges you, then you fall back, and we'll come behind him. So he charged both ways, and they both fell back. And then he pulled his men together and took off down the interstate, and they never did catch him. Well, the interstate wasn't there, but it's pretty much where he took off. He got away from them with all his prisoners. And so it's one of those amazing battles that just should not have worked, but it did. Nathan Bedford Forrest was always getting in scrapes like that, and by his daring and bravado was able to pull right through it. And they chased him all the way to the Tennessee River, and he got across, and they couldn't catch him. They couldn't catch him. Well, Joab did that. I don't know if Nathan Bedford Forrest knew this story about Joab or not, but they got Joab surrounded. They got the Ammonites in front. He was ready for them, but he didn't know about all these thousands of Syrians. They come up behind him. So Joab gets brother Abishai. He said, "Abishai, you take these men. You go after the Ammonites. And I'm going to take these choice men I'm going after those Syrians. If you need help, I'll come help you. And if I need help, you come help me." And so Joab did what General Forrest said. Charged both ways. And both sides fell back. Here's what happened. 13, and Joab drew nigh, and the people that were with him, unto the battle against the Syrians, and they fled before him. And when the children of Ammon saw that the Syrians were fled, they fled also before Abishai, and entered into the city. So Joab returned from the children of Ammon and came to Jerusalem. He got out of there, and they weren't able to close the trap. He made it back to Jerusalem where they were safe. Now, the Syrians decided they're going to try again. So the Syrians saw that they were smitten before Israel. They got together. We don't want this. We want a rematch. Remember when the Philistines tried that? It didn't work for them, did it? Syrians going to try a rematch. Hadarezer. Now, we talked about Hadadezer, and this is Hadarezer. That's the King James Version, okay? Hadadezer and Hadarezer. But other translations, they both are calling them Hadadezer. It might be the same fella. I don't know. Maybe it's his brother, Hadadezer and Hadarezer. I don't know. Might be the same fella. But it's a similar name. Hadarezer, he's called in the King James Version. Hadarezer sent and brought out the Syrians that were beyond the river, and they came to Helam. And Shubach, the captain of the host of Hadarezer, went before them. And when it was told David, he gathered all Israel together and passed over Jordan and came to Helam. And the Syrians set themselves in array against David and fought with him. So here we got another battle. David and his men, and Hadarezer and these Syrians. Here's where they are. Here they are. Do you see the arrows up there? Now that arrow is pointing to the northwest, is where Rabbah is, and that was the capital of the city of the Ammonites. That was the first battle where Joab was in that trap, and he got out of that trap by charging both ways. That second arrow pointing down to the southwest, that's Helam. That's where David's meeting with the Syrians this time. David and the Syrians coming to battle on the battleground there at Helam. Here's what happens. Here's what happens. And the Syrians fled before Israel. That's what happened. He beat them. He whooped them. The Syrians fled before Israel, and David slew the men of 700 chariots of the Syrians and 40,000 horsemen, and smote Shobach, the captain of their host, who died there. And when all the kings that were servants to Hadarezer saw that they were smitten before Israel, they made peace with Israel and served them. And the Syrians feared to help the children of Ammon anymore. So, that's the two chapters, chapters 9 and 10. David is showing kindness. Showed kindness to Mephibosheth. He tried to show kindness to Hanun. Hanun, he wasn't very smart. He should have accepted David's kindness. But being a new king and all, I guess he thought he'd show out a little bit. Well, they learned their lesson, and then the Syrians got involved, and they were sorry they did. We're looking at David here at his best, as he's ruling as king, master of the situations that come before, and a good king, a kind king. And I want us to remember that, because David was a good king. But David is a good king that's about to make a very serious, terrible mistake that is going to bring him misery for the rest of his life. We'll talk about that next week. Let's be the kind of people that when God wants to show His kindness to others in this world, that He can use us. You know, He does use us. And many times, Rockcliffe has just stepped right up to the plate, took advantage of the opportunity. People that aren't even members of this congregation, the death in the family, a sickness, problem. You know, one call goes out to the ladies here, and we can fill that downstairs with food for those who are hurting. It's God's kindness being shown to them And He knows I can count on Rockcliffe to show my kindness to these people. Kindness will come back to us. We've thrown it out there. We may not see it, but it'll come back. Kindness has a way of making itself back around. And so I'm just so proud of this congregation. And especially, this is something that really the ladies excel at, because when that calls out, it's not the men making these dishes to do this, but we have a chance. When we have a chance, kindness. You've heard this thing of random acts of kindness, haven't you? Let's be those kind of people. When people think about the church at Rockcliffe, one of the things I want them to remember, and they should remember, I tell you, those people show kindness. And let's remember that we're showing the kindness of God when we do that. I want you to be a part of this family here. And I'm looking around here, I think everybody here is. Isn't that wonderful? And if you're not, or if you want to be. You want to be. And others will want to be part of us too if we just keep doing this. And even if they don't, we're going to keep doing it, aren't we? We're going to do what's right. Kind of like Joab. We'll show ourselves men and let the Lord determine what He wants to do. But we'll show ourselves kind. The Lord will determine what He wants to do. And that's who we'll be, and that's what we'll do. You need to respond to the invitation tonight. I think everyone here knows what that's for. You need to respond to the invitation, and we're going to sing a song to enable you to do that.